In the past 10 years of Minecraft's history, how did we go from this to this? The evolution of combat on the oldest anarchy server in Minecraft has been chronicled over the past decade and is some of the most fascinating digital history you can find. By putting players in a no-rules environment, you encourage them to seek every single advantage possible over an opponent. Today we take a look at the history behind 2b2t's PvP meta, how it has changed over the last 10 years, and how we went from sticks and stones to automated warfare. The road to get there was a wild and convoluted one. Today's video is very in-depth and is the result of months of research, speaking to longtime players and some of the best PvPers on the server today. By the end of this video, you're going to be an expert. I hope you're ready. In the early days of the server's lifespan, PvP, much like Minecraft itself, was simple. Enchanted items, potions, and the hunger system didn't exist yet. Food was used to heal hearts directly and didn't stack. Everybody carried 3 weapons on them at all times. The sword, which was used for melee combat using simple swings, the bow, which back in alpha acted more like a machine gun than a bow and arrow, and the lava bucket, which could light people and blocks on fire. According to 2b2t legend XCC2, the lava bucket was the most effective of these 3 weapons on 2b2t, but using it came at a cost. If a player died in the lava, all the valuables they carried would be burned, and since repairing items had not been introduced into gameplay yet, every single piece of gear was useful, so losing it to lava was not ideal. But these 3 weapons were the primary killing methods from 2010 until late 2011. The meta didn't change until the Adventure update introduced 3 new mechanics to combat: sprinting, critical hits, and blocking. These additions gave players more options in combat and made fights more intense. When both brewing and enchanting were introduced, there was a mad rush to obtain the best possible enchantments, as having enchanted gear became the difference between winning and losing. Harming potions became very useful, and 2b2t players would eventually discover how to stack potions illegally. It was possible to throw harming potions at someone to kill them in seconds, but this exploit was eventually patched by the server's admin, Housemaster. Lava was not as effective as it used to be because of fire resistance potions, so going into 2012, swords, bows, and potions had become the meta. But the next 2 years on the server would be the first major paradigm shift in 2b2t's combat. 2012 was the first year where hack clients started to go public. While they were technically called cheat clients, they received the nickname of hacked clients by players that fell victim to them. These clients allowed players to perform actions that would otherwise be impossible, such as using X-ray to see everything underground, or tracers that showed where other players were. While Notice was not the first hack client to be used on 2b2t, it was one of the most common in the early days since it was available to the public. One of the most powerful hacks in Notice was Force Field, a very early version of what we now call Kill Aura. It was a hack that would automatically hit opponents with your sword, even if you were not aiming at them. It also gave the user an extra 1 block of reach that usually was impossible to replicate in vanilla. Since 2b2t was an anarchy server, using these clients was completely okay, and anyone that used a hack client had an immediate advantage. It was not even close. As a vanilla player, it seemed hopeless to go up against a hacker, but not all hope was lost. Later in 2012, Minecraft updated to Java Edition 1.3. This update saw the introduction of enchanted golden apples, or God apples, one of the most powerful items in Minecraft even to this day. The extra health regen, resistance, extra hearts, and fire resistance meant 2b2t suddenly became a lot safer. Vanilla players finally had a defense against someone using a hack client. God apples were craftable if you had enough gold, which by this time, many of the players did. When it came to hacker versus hacker fights, Gapples turned what used to be quicker fights into slugfests that would sometimes last upwards of 20 to 30 minutes. It was common to see players start to bring additional armor sets with them to fights in order to survive longer than their opponent. Because while God Apples almost made you invincible, they only did so if you had armor on. Additionally, in 2013, the minecart dupe was discovered on 2b2t and used to create thousands upon thousands of items for PvP use. It was the most powerful dupe the server had ever seen and encouraged more players to come to spawn to PvP. At this point, according to XCC2, PvP started to become boring. Fights were just lasting far too long to be enjoyable anymore, and because of the item dupe, there was no real risk or reward to PvPing. At this point, the PvP meta stagnated, and is what brings us into the next era. With the rise of hack clients on the server, it didn't take long for 2b2t players themselves to start creating their own. Players would often use them as a way to show loyalty. If you were loyal to Pyrobyte and the Valkyrians, you used Vapid, which was Pyrobyte's custom client and eventually continued by Kinorana. If you wanted to be like PopBob, you used NHack, which was a client created by PopBob and later continued by iTristan. As the clients updated, it became a race to see which one could outperform the others. Fights usually came down to inventory management, but if both opponents were equally geared, the better client would usually win. But this was not always the case. Even without the best hacks, it was still possible to win if you had actual PvP skill and strategy. The most famous example of this is the now legendary fight where Kingaros, the greatest traditional PvPer in 2b2t history, fought PopBob and iTristan at the same time and won. Kingaros' client was incredibly simple and did not have any advanced combat hacks. The reason he won was mainly because of his PvP knowledge and techniques. For example, block hitting, S-tapping, and W-tapping, common tactics used to combo opponents and manipulate your own hitbox, were human techniques that could not be replicated properly by a hack client at the time. Kingaros also allowed himself to take knockback during the fight. This is because Kingaros had discovered early on that using an anti-knockback hack actually degraded your own armor faster, something that the majority of the community would not discover until years later. Through sheer force of will, he managed to overcome the odds and win the fight against opponents with superior clients. But outcomes like this were not typical. While the race to create the best hack client was well underway, there was a secret development during this era that would have a major impact on the server in the future. Pyrobyte and iTristan managed to use their backdoor access to the server to create weapons with a sharpness value of 32,000, nicknamed the super weapons. They could kill opponents instantly with one hit. While the exact date of their creation is unknown, I personally remember seeing one with my own eyes as early as April of 2015. Because they were so rare, they had zero impact on the actual PvP meta. When Housemaster tried to eliminate them, a few of them survived in stashes that were sitting in unloaded chunks. Their rediscovery years later would have major ramifications. But in the spring of 2016, 2b2t updated to Java Edition 1.9, and the update that would forever remove swords as the primary weapon on Anarchy servers. While the new Minecraft update brought exciting features such as shields and elytra, it's also the update where end crystals became craftable. This powerful explosive did the same amount of damage as a charged creeper explosion and could be placed on both bedrock and obsidian. But for the first few months of the update on 2b2t, their power was relatively unknown. Melee combat was still dominant. While kill aura still functioned even while using shields, the added hit delay of melee weapons made fights even slower than they already were. It was around this time that the Rusher War began on 2b2t, where swords, axes, and bows were the primary weapons. This would be the last time traditional combat would see widespread use on the server. During this time, 2b2t player Bubba J began to experiment with end crystals. During the fourth incursion, he ignited one as a joke, and it ended up accidentally killing several of us at once with no warning. While it was hilarious at the time, this stunt caught on camera is what would begin the evolution of the crystal meta still seen to this day. Crystals could kill an opponent in full protection 4 armor in one hit if the difficulty was set to hard, which on 2b2t it always is. You could maybe survive 2 or 3 hits if you had gapples. But such a powerful item made traditional combat almost useless overnight. While they were incredibly powerful weapons, they were expensive to create, and beds in the Nether were a much cheaper alternative. Suicide bombing became an actual tactic. This explosive meta became widespread in the fall of 2016. Kingaros, in his final stint of time on 2b2t, is seen here bed bombing people in the Nether. You would act like an innocent new player, walk up to someone, and then kill them instantly. There was no real way to defend against this tactic, so most players preferred to PvP in the overworld, where you were less likely to be killed by one of these attacks. With the 1111 dupe in November of 2016, crystals saw their first widespread duping, and it became common for players to carry around stacks of them in addition to obsidian. Actual crystal fights during this time often didn't last long, because there was no real way to defend against them. But in very late 2016, with the introduction of the exploration update to 2b2t, totems of undying were added, which allowed a user to be revived upon death. This acted as a safety net so that you could actually survive end crystal and bed explosions. This item single-handedly ended the suicide bomber meta, and many PvPers that had been afraid of going near spawn slowly began to return. From here, in early 2017, Auto Totem was developed into hack clients, which automatically put extra totems in your offhand when one was used up. From here, the crystal meta began evolving quite rapidly, such as Auto Crystal and Crystal Aura being developed, allowing the user to automatically place crystals and detonate them without even aiming. By this point, PvP on 2b2t and other anarchy servers was so radically different from normal Minecraft PvP. It was almost like an entirely new game. But swords would make one final comeback in the most unexpected way possible. In the spring of 2017, a stash of super weapons that had been created by Pyrobyte and iTristan years earlier had been rediscovered, and the weapons were taken from them. It was during this time that I was given my very first set of duped super weapons from Alpha Computer, and we killed players at spawn using them for fun. One swing of the weapon instantly popped a user's totem, so using Kill Aura with a super weapon could kill opponents much faster than crystals. This didn't last long though, as Housemaster patched them so that if you tried to wield one, it would instantly revert to sharpness 5 instead of 32,000. We hid the remaining super weapons in shulkers and duped them over the course of the next year. We knew that if we kept them secret long enough, we would eventually discover a way to use them again. And sure enough, in 2018, it was discovered that by keeping them in a hopper, you could put one into your inventory using a hack client and walk around having it be fully usable. Though the limitation was that you had to stay within about 30 blocks of the hopper. After this method was discovered, Alpha Computer began selling his surplus super weapons to people for real-world money and made quite a fortune by doing this. It didn't take long for these shulkers of super weapons to be duped and mass distributed to the public. This is the first time crystals had been challenged as the primary PvP method in almost 2 years, and their widespread distribution would once again evolve the combat meta, bringing us into the present era. By 2019, 2b2t had been on the same version of Minecraft for almost 2 years, Java Edition 1.12 or the World of Color update. Spending this many years in the same update meant the only way to innovate and move the PvP meta forward was with new hacks that would give advantages over other hackers. Crystal hacks evolved during this time, making crystal placement smarter, targeting a player's lower hitbox, which is what caused the most damage, allowing crystals to be placed through solid blocks more easily. The list goes on. Despite the advances in crystal combat, 32Ks were the dominant weapon in 2019. Much like Crystal combat becoming automated due to hack clients, 32Ks went through a similar phase when Auto 32K was invented. This hack allowed the user to place a hopper and shulker instantly and begin swinging a 32K at rapid speeds. Seen here is 2b2t player Fax Machine using the Auto 32K module to instantly kill Crystal PvPers. It was perhaps one of the most overpowered PvP hacks in the server's history. But near the end of 2019, after years of trying unsuccessfully, Housemaster finally managed to patch 32K swords once and for all. Auto 32K was useless, and crystals once again became the dominant weapon on Anarchy servers. Which brings us into the present day. We are going through a hack client renaissance, with literally dozens of clients all being used on 2b2t at the same time from different developers, and players scrambling to find the best ones available. There are so many different techniques and tricks that can be used that it would be impossible to name them all in a single video at this point. I recently had the chance to train with one of the best PvPers on the server right now, Wasabi, and it made me realize just how advanced PvP has actually become. During a fight, there are so many variables to keep track of. On average, PvPers are using more than 15 hacks at the exact same time, often toggling specific ones on and off with keybinds. Anarchy servers have taken Minecraft PvP and made it unrecognizable from what it normally is supposed to be. As the server continues to survive, what will happen to the 2b2t PvP meta? Will we see this style of PvP taken to the limit? Only time will tell. The evolution of combat on 2b2t is not so different from warfare in the real world, and it's a fascinating parallel. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button. Also make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram to stay updated on when new Minecraft content is coming out. That's it for today, everyone. Take it easy and stay alive out there, FitFam.